Today, we're diving into a really high-stakes constitutional showdown. It's a drama that pits elected state governments against the power of governors, with the Supreme Court basically playing referee. This whole story is about power, delay, and who really gets the final say on the laws that govern us.
So just imagine this for a second. Your elected representatives, the people you voted for, they debate, they draft, and they pass a new law. But then, nothing. Crickets. The bill just sits there on a desk, unsigned, for months, maybe even for years. And this isn't some made-up scenario. This is the very real problem that forced India's Supreme Court to step in and try to clarify the rules of the game.
You see, for years, this constitutional logjam has been building up. State legislatures do their job. They pass bills and send them to the governor for that final signature, the assent that makes it a law. But more and more, those bills were just getting stuck in a kind of political limbo. This created a huge standoff between what the people wanted through their lawmakers and the authority of the governor.
Now, at the very heart of this entire mess is one specific part of the Indian Constitution, Article 200. You can think of this as the official playbook. It tells the governor exactly what they're supposed to do when a bill lands on their desk. The whole debate really comes down to what this article says, and maybe even more importantly, what it doesn't say.
So, what are the governor's options according to this playbook? Well, Article 200 gives them three clear choices. First, they can grant assent. Boom, the bill becomes law. Simple enough. Second, they can reserve the bill for the president to look at. Or third, they can withhold assent and send the bill right back where it came from, back to the legislature with some notes. But do you see what's missing here? There's no official fourth option that says they can just sit on it indefinitely. And that, right there, is where the whole problem started.
So the Supreme Court saw this happening over and over, basically paralyzing state governments. They decided it was time to intervene. And on April 8th, a two-judge bench came up with what seemed like a pretty straightforward solution to break this deadlock. They decided to introduce a clock.
And here it is, 3 months. That was the magic number. The court essentially said, all right, enough is enough. They decided to fill what they saw as a gap in the Constitution and slapped a firm 3-month time limit on governors and even the president to make a decision, any decision, on a bill that comes their way.
You know, this was a huge change. We went from a system with no specified deadline, this big constitutional gray area that basically allowed for these endless delays, to a very clear court-mandated rule. A 3-month clock was now officially ticking for the executive branch.
But hold on, the story doesn't end there. In a pretty dramatic twist, this brand new 3-month rule got challenged almost immediately. And not just by anyone. The issue got kicked all the way up to the president of India, who then turned right back around to the Supreme Court with a very, very big question.
Now you think a clear deadline would fix everything, right? Problem solved. Well, not so fast. The government basically argued that by setting a timeline, the judiciary was overstepping its bounds. It was jumping into the territory of the executive, and that blurs the lines of power.
And this challenge happened through a very specific and pretty rare legal process. It's called a presidential reference. So, under Article 143 of the Constitution, the president can formally ask the Supreme Court for its expert opinion on a major question of law. This isn't your typical appeal. It's a formal consultation on something of huge national importance. And just to give you a sense of how big a deal this was, get this. It was only the 16th time in the entire history of modern India that a president has done this. That fact alone tells you everything you need to know about the constitutional stakes involved here.
All right, so the stage is set. A larger 5-judge constitutional bench was put together to give the final definitive answer. And their verdict? It was way more nuanced than that original ruling. They said this wasn't really about setting clocks and timelines. It was about defining and balancing the powers of each branch of government.
So first, the big headline. The larger bench threw out the 3-month rule. They argued that trying to impose a rigid, one-size-fits-all timeline just wasn't practical. I mean, some bills are incredibly complex, and they need more time to be considered than others. The judiciary, they said, can't just act like a legislature and start writing new deadlines into the Constitution.
But, and this is probably the most important part of the whole thing, the court didn't just give governors a free pass to delay things forever. At the same time they struck down the timeline, they also issued a very stern warning against prolonged and evasive inaction. A governor can't just stick a bill in a drawer and forget about it.
This entire ruling really hangs on a core constitutional idea, one designed to make sure no single part of the government gets too powerful, the separation of powers. The court basically said, look, our job is to interpret the law, not to manage the timetables of the executive branch. Each part of the government, legislative, executive, and judicial, has to stay in its own lane. Okay, so let's just boil this all down into 3 key takeaways from the final verdict. Number 1, no more court-imposed deadlines. That's gone. Number 2, governors still have a constitutional duty to act. They can't just delay things indefinitely. And number 3, and this is the new check and balance, the courts can step in, but only in glaring circumstances of really extreme and unexplained delay.
So, after all that back and forth, what does this actually mean for how laws get made in India? While the Supreme Court has basically tried to replace a hard and fast rule with a more flexible principle. And in doing so, it's redrawn the lines of power and responsibility.
So here's how this new balance of power is supposed to work. The legislature, they can pass all the bills they want, but they can't force the governor to sign. The governor holds that power of assent, but now they're limited because they know that just sitting on a bill forever can be challenged in court. And the Supreme Court? Well, it holds the ultimate power to interpret the Constitution, but it says it will only jump in the most extreme cases of delay.
And check this out, because this is a really fascinating legal point the court made. While a governor, as a person, has total immunity from being dragged into court, their official action, or in this case, their inaction, on a bill does not have that same protection. So what that means is you can't sue the governor, but you can challenge the constitutional failure of their office to do its job.
And all of this leaves us with one final, crucial question. The court got rid of a rigid timeline because it wanted to protect the separation of powers. In its place, it's given us this more flexible standard based on reason and principle. But is this the perfect balance between power and accountability? Or has the court just traded a clear rule for a brand new constitutional gray area, leaving the definition of unreasonable delay to be fought over in the political arena for years to come?